The rain pounded relentlessly on the tin roof of Amachu police station as Officer Chinedu leaned back in his chair, a smug smile plastered on his face. Before him, Chief Okafor, one of the wealthiest men in town, sat across the desk with a briefcase filled with cash. "Officer Chinedu," Chief Okafor began, his voice as smooth as the leather of his Italian shoes. "My son is not going to jail. Accidents happen. Find someone else to blame, maybe one of the wretched boys that was arrested on the scene, one of his friends. You know what I mean, office." Chinedu smiled, pulling the briefcase closer to himself. "Chief, you can rest easy. I'll handle it. Consider this case closed." They both shake hands, smiling. Later that evening, an old woman burst into the station, soaked to the skin from the relentless rain. It was Mama Nkechi, the mother of Uchenna, the young man Chinedu had framed for Chief Okafor's son's crime. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hands trembling as she holds a small bag. "Officer, please," she begged, falling to her knees in front of Chinedu's desk. "My son is innocent. Uchenna would never hurt a soul. He's all I have. Please, let me see him." Chinedu sneered, refusing to meet her tearful gaze. "Madam, your son is a criminal. He caused the accident and killed those people. Go home before I throw you in a cell too." "Please, officer," she wailed, crawling closer. "I beg you. He's my only child. He's all I have left in this world." Chinedu rose from his chair, his face darkening. "Are you deaf, woman? Leave this place now." When she refused to leave, he grabbed her by the arm and dragged her out of the station. The rain soaked her thin dress as he shoved her onto the muddy ground. She hit her head on the concrete steps, and a thin stream of blood trickled down her face. "Leave here, you witch," he barked. Mama Nkechi staggered to her feet, the pain in her head intensifying as she limped down the road. I warned him about this rich people he's keeping as friends, but he will not listen." The rain blurred her vision, but she pressed on, muttering prayers under her breath. But as she reached the town square, her legs gave way. She fell to the ground, clutching her bleeding head, and raised her hands to the sky. "God of justice," she whispered through her tears, "let the one who has done this to my son never know peace. May his life crumble as mine has. May his joy turn to sorrow, his wealth to ashes, and his nights to torment." Her strength failed her, and she collapsed, her lifeless body lying in the rain. The next morning, her cold, still form was discovered by passers-by. Ironically, Chinedu himself was called to the scene. "She's just another one of life's casualties," he said coldly as her body was loaded into a van. 2 weeks later, Chinedu was on patrol when he spotted a sleek red car parked by the roadside. Behind the wheel was a stunning woman with glowing dark skin and a figure that turned heads. She rolled down the window and smiled. "Good evening, officer," she said, her voice like honey. "Is there a problem?" Felt his heart skip a beat. Her beauty was hypnotic. "Not at all, madame. Just making sure everything is okay." She introduced herself as Amara, claiming her car had overheated. Chinedu, eager to impress, offered to help. They talked as he fiddled with the engine, and soon their laughter filled the quiet night. "Let me thank you properly," Amara said, her eyes glinting mischievously. "Don't live far. Or we could stay here." Before long, the two were locked in a passionate embrace in the front seat of her car. As the rain began to drizzle outside, Chinedu felt an unexplainable chill creep over him, but he dismissed it, lost in the moment. Chinedu had an unprotected intimacy with her, a one-night stand by the roadside inside her car. That night, Chinedu had the first of many nightmares. He dreamed of lying in a graveyard under a torrential downpour. Snakes slithered around his body, hissing and tightening around his limbs. He woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, his sheets soaked through as if he had been in the rain. "What's happening? What kind of a dream is this?" he muttered, clutching his chest. "I have never had such a bad dream before. What could this mean?" The next night was worse. He dreamed of Amara standing over him, her eyes glowing red, her voice a low growl. "Did you think you could get away with it?" she whispered. He woke up screaming, only to find himself clutching a wet, muddy pillow, his pants wet like he just had it in the dream. What is happening to me these days? Why do I keep dreaming of Amara, and why in the graveyard? By the end of the week, his torment extended beyond his dreams. His salary disappeared from his bank account without explanation. At work, he began forgetting basic protocols, earning the scorn of his colleagues. He started seeing shadows in the corners of his room and hearing whispers calling his name. One rainy evening, Chinedu pulled over a battered old car. Inside was a pastor in a white robe. The man looked at Chinedu with piercing eyes and spoke softly. "You're carrying a heavy burden, young man," the pastor said. Chinedu frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I see 3 heads on your shoulders. 2 of them are upside down." Chinedu tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the rain continued to pour. The headlights from the pastor's battered car illuminated the road dimly, but the old man's words echoed louder than the raindrops on the windshield. "You've angered a spirit, one that won't rest until justice is served," the pastor had said, his voice calm but piercing. "What spirit?" Chinedu had asked, his voice shaky. He wasn't sure if he wanted to know the answer. The pastor leaned closer, his white robe damp from the rain. "The spirit of a mother wronged, a widow who died with pain and anger in her heart because of your greed." Chinedu's breath caught in his throat. "I don't know what you're talking about." The pastor shook his head slowly. "You know exactly what I mean. You drove her out into the rain. You refused to listen to her cries. Her blood calls for justice, and until you make amends, your life will only get worse. Her son that you framed, your past mistake, the blood of your stepmother, and her daughter, your half-sister you framed." Chinedu clenched his jaw. "And what am I supposed to do?" The pastor's eyes softened. "Make peace with her. Bury her properly. Right the wrongs you have done, and cleanse your hands from evil. Only then will you be free." When Chinedu got home that night, he sat in his dark, empty living room. His heart raced as memories began to flood his mind. The pastor's words had struck something deep inside him. He rested his head in his hands and muttered, "How did it come to this? How did my life become like this?" The rain outside seemed to grow louder, as if urging him to remember. Chinedu's childhood was not a happy one. His mother, Nkem, and her younger sister, Ada, had grown up in a small village with their father, Ejike. Their mother had died when Chinedu's grandfather, a violent drunk, beat her to death during an argument. Ejike was arrested, leaving the 2 sisters to fend for themselves. At just 13, Nkem dropped out of school to hawk goods in the market and take care of her little sister Ada. The bond between them was strong, but life was harsh. Every day, Nkem sacrificed her dreams so Ada could go to school. Years passed, and Ada grew into a beautiful young woman. She graduated, and her sister Nkem stood beside her proud. Ada married a wealthy businessman named Chike, and for a while it seemed like all their struggles were behind them. But there was one problem. Ada couldn't have children. After years of trying, they visited so many specialist hospitals. She visited different herbalists and also prayed every day from one church to another, but still nothing happened. She thought to herself, "I will not let another woman come into my home and spoil me happiness." She begged her husband to take another wife. "Marry my sister, Nkem," Ada pleaded one evening, tears streaming down her face. At least if it's her, I won't feel like I'm losing everything. Chike hesitated, but eventually he agreed. Nkem was reluctant at first. Ada, how can I marry your husband? What will people say? Let them say whatever they want, Ada insisted. You're my sister. I trust you more than anyone else. Please. After much persuasion, Nkem agreed, and soon she became Chike's second wife. The arrangement worked. For a while, both sisters became pregnant at the same time, and what should have been a blessing turned into a nightmare. Nkem gave birth to a healthy baby boy, Chinedu, while Ada had a baby girl, Chimam, but Ada's joy was short-lived. Every time she looked at Nyek's son, jealousy bubbled inside her. She began to see him as a threat. What if Chike dies one day? Ada whispered to herself late at night. Nyekem's son will inherit everything. My Chioma will have nothing. Her jealousy soon turned into resentment. She started treating Nkem coldly, accusing her of stealing Chike's love. You never even tried to find a man of your own, Ada snapped one afternoon during an argument. You were just waiting for me to give you mine. Nkem, who had endured Ada's insults for months, finally snapped. I gave up everything for you, Ada. My life, my education, everything. And this is how you repay me? Their fights became a daily occurrence, poisoning the household. Even their children, Chinedu and Chioma, were forbidden to play together. The house, once filled with laughter, became a battlefield. The tension finally came to a head one evening at dinner. Chike scolded Ada for her constant quarrels with Nkem. Why can't you let it go, Ada? Chike shouted. You asked for this arrangement and now you're tearing this family apart. Ada's daughter, Chioma, watched the argument from the corner of the room. Her small hands clenched into fists as tears streamed down her face. She couldn't bear to see her mother cry anymore. The next day, while Nkem prepared dinner in the kitchen, Chioma sneaked in and poured cockroach poison into the pot. It was a childish act of revenge. Born from anger and confusion, her thoughts was to spoil the food taste, not knowing the repercussions of what she's doing. She cried to her mother heavily, saying she needs ice cream, and her mother, being over-pampering, carried her to the supermarket to get the ice cream. When dinner was served, Chike and Nkem were the first to eat. Within minutes, they began clutching their stomachs, gasping for air. By the time Ada returned from the supermarket with Chioma, both Chike and Nkem were dead. Chinedu, realizing what had happened, panicked and ran to his mother's body, wailing. Ada, only 7 years old, stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. When the neighbors arrived, they found Chioma pointing at Chinedu. He did it, she screamed. He poisoned them. I saw him. Ada was too devastated to say anything. From that day on, Chinedu was labeled a murderer. Ada made his life a living hell for killing her sister and her husband.